And of course, once you exclude the true and living God and His law and standards, foolish substitutes necessarily spring up in their place. Man is such a creature that he has to be subservient to something, because we're small, frail. And if you are no longer concerned with what God thinks of you, and you think that to be a burden, I don't like this word sin, don't like God accusing me, don't enjoy coming to church because I feel guilty, well then, you will become even more fearful and even more crippled by what other people think of you. Mankind has to be concerned what someone outside of himself thinks. And hence you have a world in which we don't care what God thinks, but if we said something that offended some poor Muslim because we said the truth, we have to change our whole civilization and culture so that he won't get annoyed. And I daren't say anything true, or else so-and-so will get offended. And so I just keep my mouth shut. And if you forget about laying up treasures in heaven, you will get trapped in the rat race whereby you always have to keep up with what other people have or do. You have to score points somewhere. And those who reject the Ten Commandments, thinking that that is an unsufferable law, today are enmeshed in political correctness, which is not some neutral code, but which is a humanistic, anti-Christian ethic which enslaves its devotees to the fear of man and society and the state. So when you leave the Lord, who brings us out of Egypt, brings us to Mount Sinai and gives us a code, a law for thankful living, and run back onto the taskmasters of Egypt who beat you hard and say, make more bricks, and you don't need any straw. And once you think that you own yourself in the 21st century, you will find that the state owns you. That's a common factor in most of the philosophies of our age, that the state becomes increasingly intrusive and totalitarian. If you think you own yourself, well, it'll dictate the way you ought to live in a godless fashion. And what chance do you have? One man before the mighty state, with all its authority and power, Leviathan, which crushes. If you won't serve God, who's a gracious master, you will serve some other power and be enslaved to its laws and dictates. Because when you say, I want to be my own, and cast off the Lord, there's something else, meaner, nastier, which will trap you. But perhaps the starkest and coldest form of self-ownership is atheistic evolutionism, which is the dominant philosophy and worldview in Northern Ireland, in the British Isles, in the European Union, in the Western world. Atheistic evolutionism. To cast off the personal triune God, then you will find that ultimate reality is impersonal matter, things, physical objects, along with time and chance, a world without mercy or kindness that crushes and kills as part of the system. If you belong to yourself and think as an evolutionist, you are one piece of developed slime, owning yourself as developed slime. You're welcome to it. You own a lot there, don't you? Or an intelligent ape that comes to the self-consciousness and says, I own my hairy arms, and I'll do what I want with them. And then you and the rest of mankind in your mind are alone in the universe. Perhaps this is why atheistic scientists get so excited at spending other people's taxes on the search for extraterrestrial life. We're all alone on this earth. All we have is each other. Maybe, just maybe, there's someone else out there. And we're not isolated, alone, and lonely. We can't believe in angels. Perish the thought that God should have made the world. But maybe E.T.'s out there. And if we pick up the phone at the right time, he may be calling us. What a comfort, says the Heidelberg Catechism. What a comfort not to belong to yourself. And our society is filled with the bitter fruit and misery of this notion that we belong to ourselves. Why do people get drunk? Why do people take drugs? Relief from the boring monotony of life? An escape from hardship? I want a little bit of pleasure in my life because I'm dry as dust in my heart. And maybe if I inject myself, and it's my own body, and I can do what I want, and this is what the state schools and the universities are teaching our children, you belong to yourself. Experiment sexually. If it brings you pleasure, and if it makes you feel good, so long as nobody else gets hurt or not too much, you are free to do it. That's what being a human being, that's what being an adult and a maturing person means. I can't face the world. That's people thinking, I belong to myself. That's where it got them. If I belong to myself, as unregenerate, godless man typically thinks, then suicide is not only justifiable, but the right thing to do if there is more misery in my life than happiness. And so as atheism progresses and people become more consistent in their evolutionary beliefs, then suicide is the logical option. And if I belong to myself, and I am a woman, and if I am a woman who is pregnant, and if I judge that this child is likely to bring me more stress, grief, hassle, so that my quality of life as I judge it will be lower if the infant is born, then I can not only kill myself, suicide, but I can kill my baby, which is the nice term, abortion. Not murder, abortion. That's the way the world thinks. I belong to myself. And there's no comfort in that world. It's a world of death. Our society is increasingly engaging in divorce and remarriage. And a society engaging in divorce and remarriage is a society where the people are increasingly thinking and therefore acting out the central belief, I belong to myself. I'm not getting emotional or intellectual or sexual fulfillment from this relationship. My spouse, yes, will be hurt if I leave. It will look bad. Our children will suffer. But I have to look out for me. I belong to myself. I will soon be dead and under the sods. I want to get a little bit more pleasure in this world, and I'm off. And if I see somebody younger, wealthier, or who makes me feel better about me, I will marry that person, so that my pleasure is more important than my spouse and children. To which the Christian responds, I'm glad that I don't belong to myself. Of course, and I've been explaining this too, once you really believe that you belong to yourself, you become selfish. Selfish. God didn't make us for that. Unless the grace of God intervenes, those who live thinking that they belong to themselves will die that way. Hell, of course, amongst other terrible things, is a place of echoing loneliness. The darkness and blackness of eternity, where a person is expelled from God's glory and all light and joy and peace forever, with never even the hope of a chink of it reaching them, and tormented in the flames to boot, plus more. Because now you see, those who think that they belong to themselves actually belong in their deepest spiritual allegiance to the devil, though they deny him, which is part of their blindness and misery too. And so Lord's Day 1 explains that the death of Christ delivered me from all the power of the devil, which requires the truth that those who are not delivered by Christ are under his dominion and rule. Those who think that they belong to themselves are the children and slaves of Satan. And master and slave will meet the same terrible punishment from the sovereign God. And the Christian says, my comfort is that I am not my own, and therefore do not belong to Satan, because I've begun to think here a little bit this evening what it really means to belong to myself. And I'm comforted that I don't belong to myself. I used to belong to myself. I used to think I was my own. I thought that I was wise and answerable to no one, but God converted me graciously to myself, and I understood that I was leading a life based upon lies. That's the negative bit. My comfort is that I am not my own, but positively, I belong unto my faithful Saviour Jesus Christ, and I'm glad about that. The comfort is that I belong to Jesus Christ totally, body and soul, says answer 1. So there's nothing of me that he does not own, all of me. In life and death, that's the next clause. I belong to him now, in the future, and even in the world beyond. This is the everlasting consolation of the Christian gospel. This is the way the Christian says, I want it. No half measures, all of me, body and soul, in life and death and beyond death, because I believe, contrary to the wisdom of the world, that freedom is service to Jesus Christ as a bond slave. Whereas the world believes that freedom is slavery to sin. And not only do I belong to Jesus Christ totally, but I belong to him not merely because I'm created by him, but especially because of redemption. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 20 says, ye are bought with a price. What price? Answer 1 of the Heidelberg Catechism says that I belong to my faithful Saviour Jesus Christ, who with his precious blood has paid the price. Peace to you. He has fully satisfied for all my sins, so that I don't have to satisfy by my own sufferings, by my own money, by my own good works, because it has all been paid for fully. And he has delivered me from all the power of the devil, principally by the cross, in the new man, and perfectly in the world to come. Be consoled.